Well, it's been in the plans for a while. So what they now have set up is a host city committee, and basically what they do is actually examine future hosts and independently assess the merit of any application, and they then can make a recommendation based on the evidence to get games approved quickly, but also not without the IOC executive members having to vote and take their time from that perspective.
Not only their time, but of course there's always been the famous levels of corruption and hand greasing that goes on in the lead up to cities bidding. Does that take that out of the equation as well?
Yes, definitely. Back in the day when there would be 5 or 6 cities hosting to bidder games, the IOC executive would fly around to each of the cities, get hosted in 6-star hotels, get given the world tour, and then executives were kind of bribed on the side to vote for those cities. So it was quite corrupt. This way is totally independent, and the future host committee has sole discretion on who they give the games to.
It's always been debatable as to how much a Olympic Games brings to a city in terms of financial gain. Is that a factor that's now also been taken into account, the costs and whether they do run profitably for countries?
Well, unfortunately, they haven't run profitably for over 40 years, since Los Angeles, I think, back in 1984. So I think we're looking at, it's very optimistic of John Coates to suggest that this game's in southeast Queensland will break even. Obviously, Tokyo may have had a similar thought, but not with a crystal ball to determine that they would have COVID, they would have postponement, and all the other problems that have gone on. So in a lovely world, your budget comes in, you've got your spending, but we don't know the unpredictable. So I'm assuming there's a contingency amount of money, but breaking even, it's quite a hard one.
It's a mythology, no doubt. Tell us a little bit about, we've talked a lot about Tokyo, of course, because they were delayed and now it looks as if they're going ahead. But Tokyo is now saying to the athletes, you turn up at your own risk and participate at your own risk. Is that feasible?
Well, that's coming from the IOC as well. So even though they put out all the playbooks regarding the rules and the safety, it's very clear that they've made it that the athletes, if you go there, it is at your own risk. So we're yet to hear what the National Olympic Committee, and for us that's the AOC, and the national sporting organisations, where do they stand on ensuring athletes and staff and looking after anybody if they do get COVID and do get sick. So who's going to cover the costs of that illness?
Yeah. How much do you think has COVID impacted the future of the Olympic Games? Obviously, we are hoping that vaccines and this whole pandemic will calm down to some level of normalcy. But do you think it changes the dynamic, not only for the Olympic Games, but for lots of different sporting events?
I definitely think it has. I think we're much more conscious of hygiene. We're much more conscious of social distancing and spacing ourselves, and also the use of masks. I know in many Asian countries you'd see masks used quite often, but I think this will be a thing around the world, that masks in busy, congested sport events and hand sanitizer and other safety measures may just be an ongoing precaution that we use at all sport events.
I noticed too France is looking at dispersing the risk of hosting events, so actually holding some events outside of the country and in different parts of the country. Is that something we're going to see more commonly as well in the future for Olympic Games?
I think so. So back in 2014, the IOC produced a document called Agenda 2020, and it had 40 recommendations on how to make the Olympic Games more sustainable, how to make cost of bidding cheaper, and the cost of running the Games to make it more affordable for those host nations. And that included not having to have brand new facilities, not having to have all the venues in one lovely location that's all accessible within a 30-minute drive. So now they're actually allowing nations to bid and say, well, you can actually hold it across various cities around one country. So it will be multifaceted, like southeast Queensland will be for the Brisbane bid.
I wondered too how politically I've noticed that Canada has spoken out about, for example, what's happening in Xinjiang and China hosting events into the future. Do you think there's a risk that the Olympic Games could again become a political football?
Well, I don't think it's ever not going to be a political football. Politics will always be ingrained in the Games. The bidding process will still all be political. How it's played out and how the IOC allocate Games to host cities, despite having the future host committee, I think they still have some obligation to share the load across continents and to give nations that haven't had the Games an opportunity, because the Olympics are about fairness, opportunity, equality, and allowing everybody to share this dream. And I think it's going to be very hard to say no to some countries just because of their low gross domestic product or whatever other rules and regulations or political systems they have in place. It's going to be very hard to say no, and they're going to have to spread it around if there's still bids.
Interesting. Fairness the key. Good to talk. Thanks so much, Lisa.
Great. Thanks for your time.